It's me, Jessica McCaskill, WBC, WBA Super Lightweight Unified Champion of the world. I wanted to give a big shout out to The Relay on YouTube. Check it out. Great boxing talk show. Has all the info that you need. Check it out. The Relay on YouTube.
Motherfucking Relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Well, Seniesa Estrada was just in action against Estrada-Abaniel, seasoned journeyman contender, experienced, been around the world, been around the block, knows her way around a ring. The kind of opponent you expect to see a young up-and-coming prospect square off against to get the rounds in, to work on things. Seniesa Estrada was in action against Estrada-Abaniel, and let me tell you something. Seniesa Estrada has the look of a more experienced fighter than she actually is. I mean, you see her out there, she's poised, she's controlled, she's tempered. You know, she's not just using her youth and what physical attributes she has to run down an opponent. Rather, she uses those physical attributes in unison, in junction with stratagem. That Seniesa Estrada, she's not just a hard puncher, she's not just a fast set of hands or a good set of legs, she's actually a tactician. Rough start in the first round, I'll say this much, that the experience of Estrada-Abaniel, you know, I think that's where it showed up the most, very early in the fight, in the first round, that she came out swinging, she came out aggressive. It took Seniesa a little bit more time to settle in, start landing the kind of punches that she wants to land, and I'd say in about the second round, that's when you saw the tide turn. That's when you saw Seniesa really settle in, be more poised, more controlled, and sharpshoot, picking her spots from both the southpaw and orthodox stance, and she did so fluently. It was a smooth transition, while at the same time being sudden, but subtle enough that you had to look for it, that you'd notice that sometimes Seniesa is leading with the right, sometimes she's leading with the left, but she's being effective in doing both. And, you know, switch hitting, it's become a thing, you know, because of fighters like Terrence Crawford, to a lesser extent, Daniel Jacobs, and, you know, Ruiz, he kind of tried it in his rematch with Estrada. It didn't work out for him, but it did work out for Seniesa Estrada. And I think it's because, you know, some fighters have more success switch hitting because it's not forced. It comes naturally to some fighters, and that's what makes the transition a fluid transition, a subtle transition, that it's not that obvious that before you know it, the fighter that you were looking at who was jabbing with the left is suddenly jabbing with the right, thereby changing the angle of attack. Suddenly, they have the ability for their jab to come over their opponent's jab because they're leading with the right against what is an orthodox fighter. And Seniesa Estrada, she exhibited these skills. This is why so many people that have seen her in action, that do know of her, they're very high on her because she shows a lot of qualities. She's not just a fast set of hands, not just a good set of legs, you know, not just a physically gifted fighter, but a tactician as well. We often talk about in and out game and how important that is to a fighter's repertoire. Something I mentioned in my previous video in regards to Sophia Leash, yet another up-and-comer. And in and out game, it is important for you to be able to fight going both forwards and backwards. Sometimes you've got to be the aggressor, sometimes you've got to be the defender. And we saw Seniesa Estrada put those skills on display with effective aggression and effective counterpunching. That whenever, you know, Gretchen decided to get froggy and decided to leap, you know, she'd catch a big left hook.
Right in the face.
Big left hook upstairs, you know, and it's not just shots upstairs. There was also body work on the part of Seniesa Estrada, and I think that's what sealed the deal at the end of the fourth, that, you know, you really had to be looking for these body shots, but they were there, and we all know that body shots can take a lot out of a fighter, especially a fighter that's not ready for them. Quite honestly, I don't think Gretchen expected Seniesa to go downstairs on her.
But she did.
But she did, and by the end of the fourth, Gretchen had had enough. She didn't have anything left. She didn't want to come out for the fifth, and this denotes just what kind of a special fighter Seniesa Estrada is. That she's not just a physically gifted fighter, she's also a very well-rounded tactical fighter. And quite honestly, if you want my opinion, anything short of a top 10 fighter, anything short of a world champion, is easy pickings for Seniesa Estrada at this point in the juncture, because I'm of the opinion that she's ready to fight for a world title, that she is, right now, prepared for just such an endeavor. And at light flyweight, where Seniesa fights, you have, you know, what is arguably the most accomplished champion of any champion at the weight, Jessica Tutibab, holding the WBA title. Yesenia Gomez holding the WBC title. Evelyn Bermudez, the sister of Daniela Bermudez, who graces the Ring IQ pound for pound list. You have Evelyn Bermudez holding the IBF title, and Tenkai Tsunami, experienced champion, holding the WBO title. So there's enough scraps, enough world titles, and enough experienced fighters to go around. And I'm of the opinion that anything short of these kinds of fighters, anything short of these kinds of champions, is easy pickings for Senicia. These other girls that are out there trying to be somebody, they don't have it, but she does. And it's for this reason I think she's ready to fight for a world title. Against who? We don't know, because Senicia Estrada does have a Marlen Esparza fight in mind. It's something that she wants to do before the end of the year. And we know that, Marlen Esparza, she just geared her comeback. She had her comeback fight after having been with child. So while Senicia might be feeling ready for that fight, and while she may want to have that fight before the end of the year, I am not yet convinced that Marlen Esparza is going to go for that so soon. She's still in the comeback process.
So I don't expect to see that right
But
away.
I will say that, tonight's fight, it was a fantastic fight, fantastic showing. Senicia Estrada put on display why anybody who's actually seen her in action wants to see her in action again. So congratulations to her in defense of what was her WBC silver title, and hopefully sometime in the near future, we'll get to see her fight for the full version of a world title. In other news, Katie Taylor had this to say. She says, "I'm undisputed. I don't care what anyone says." A portion of the article reads, "There is an outcry for a rematch, and Taylor believes that a rematch will eventually go down, and she hopes that it takes place in the near future. The general consensus is that it was a very close fight, but I definitely think I deserve to win the fight," Taylor told Sky Sports. "I definitely did enough in the early rounds to win the fight. I'm happy that it did go that way, and I'm now sitting here as the undisputed champion, and I really couldn't care less what anybody else says. The rematch is inevitable at some time, and I'm happy to give her a rematch at any point. We'll see what happens over the next few months, but I do look forward to a rematch soon." And this is still a talking point. There are still a lot of people out there that feel very passionate about this particular subject because they feel that Delphine got robbed. I said it before, I'll say it again. My initial impression of the fight is that if there are people out there that feel that Delphine won, it's because no matter what Katie Taylor was doing, Delphine never stopped coming forward. She never took her foot off the gas, and she had moments of her own. More than one, more than some. She had several moments throughout the fight. It was a closer fight than you're accustomed to seeing Katie Taylor in. There is the novelty and the effect of that to the viewer, that where you're accustomed to seeing Katie Taylor go out there and pounce on girls that are a bit too afraid to let their hands go, Delphine was not that girl. Delphine came to fight. Delphine came to win. And throughout the entirety of the match, she never stopped coming forward no matter what was going on. She stayed the aggressor for the duration of the fight. That gives people the impression that she, I think at least, that gives people the impression that she, they think she's winning more rounds than she actually is. Because you know what? Yes, Delphine was coming forward, but it's not like she wasn't getting hit when she was coming forward. Katie Taylor was landing scoring blows, and so was Delphine. I don't take that away from her. I'm just of the opinion that upon giving the fight a second look, which is what I did, and I rescored it, having seen the fight the first time, I scored it a draw. Having seen the fight the second time, I kind of saw how Katie could have nicked. I believe it was the 8th round. I'll leave the link to that video in the description box for a more detailed analysis. In any event, these kinds of fights, these kinds of situations, when it comes to elite level, notoriable fighters, it's not exclusive to Katie Taylor, you understand. Sugar Ray Leonard and his victory over Marvin Hagler, contentious subject. Some people scored it for Leonard, some people scored it for Hagler, Floyd Mayweather and Castillo. There's a lot of people, they still feel real passionate about that fight. They feel that Castillo had done enough to win, and in spite of Floyd winning in more decisive fashion in the second fight, they still think there's something to be said in regards to the first. These kinds of fights, they happen, But I think a rematch with Delphine Persoon really is the first order of business. It should be the first order of business. And in all honesty, it should be. Now that Katie Taylor's got all the belts in the weight class, right? There are no more champions left for you to target. I don't think she's going to be moving up to 140 pounds just yet, in which case, a Delphine Persoon rematch is just what the doctor ordered. Do it now. Do it while people are still talking about it, while there still is interest in the rematch. You know, I think a lot of people want to see that. There is talk of the Amanda Serrano fight, but let's be honest. A lot of the dialogue we've been seeing from Amanda, it gives off the impression that Taylor fight, it's not a priority to her. You know, there's been lots of little things that have been said here and there. Comments aimed at Lou DiBella, comments aimed at Eddie Hearn, you know. Things that give you the impression that Amanda, at least from where Amanda's sitting, it's not as important to her as it might be to the fans. That the fans want to see Katie Taylor fight someone the likes of an Amanda Serrano. But even that fight, even that, I feel, takes a backseat to a Persoon rematch. Because they've got unfinished business. For all those people out there who feel that, you know, Delphine, she should have got the nod, I think that should be the first order of business. And the aesthetic of the fight was pleasing enough that people would be happy to see a rematch between those two fighters. Maybe Katie Taylor adjusts to Delphine's style, having experienced it in the first fight. You understand? Because Katie Taylor, she's not one that has a whole heap of pro fights. She is still adjusting from an amateur style to a pro style. Whereas Delphine, as far as Delphine's concerned, she's got far more experience in that department, so she knows how to rough a fighter up. She knows how to make a polished boxer feel uncomfortable, because the difference in styles, you know, there's the amateurs, there's the pros, and there is a difference. Maybe it's not something the casual observer can notice, but it is something that the fighters can tell, can feel, and I think Delphine put that on display. The bottom line is, I don't think there's any fight in the lightweight division for Katie Taylor more important, that is more of a pressing matter than that fight. I think that should be the next fight. While the fight is still fresh in people's minds, while people are still talking about it, a rematch should be the first order of business. Let me tell you something. This wasn't your run-of-the-mill fight. Wasn't your run-of-the-mill fight, run-of-the-mill title defense. It wasn't even your run-of-the-mill unification. You understand? This was for the Undisputed Lightweight Championship, for all the belts. And that way, it's the kind of fight that's going to stay with people, because it's a short list of fighters that can say, especially in this era, the 4-belt alphabet era, it's a short list of fighters, male or female, that can say they've been undisputed champions. So this is a fight that will be reflected upon for many years to come, and in that way, you don't want to leave that unfinished business. You don't want to sit on this one. You know that Chantel Cameron, she's going to be fighting an eliminator very soon to get a crack at one of Katie Taylor's belts. Fantastic fight between Taylor and Cameron. It'll be a fantastic fight if and when it goes down. But that fight, like the Serrano fight, like I just said, it takes a back seat to the unfinished business, because, you know, Cameron's not as accomplished as Persoon by any margin. And Serrano, she's a good fighter, but, you know, look at Serrano's resume, up and down, from top to bottom, beginning to end, and find me a fighter the caliber of a Delphine Persoon. For as long as Amanda Serrano's been around, she's never fought somebody like that. I'll tell you that fucking shit right now. And that's why Taylor versus Persoon 2 should be the first order of business. That's the important fight. That's the one. And people want to see it, so it should be the first order of business. I wouldn't mind seeing it on the undercard for Joshua versus Ruiz too. That'd be fan-fucking-tastic, okay? End the year with a bang. Put a stamp on it. You know, I think Katie Taylor can adjust and win more decisively in a rematch. I think she can do that. But, you know, she's got to actually have the fight to get the credit, so that when people look back, they'll say, you know what? The first fight was close, but she put a stamp on it in the second one. And that should settle all the arguments. And finally, just in keeping with the theme of unifying all the belts and becoming an undisputed champion, unified heavyweight champion Andy Ruiz, he had this to say. He said, after beating Anthony Joshua, I'll talk to Suleiman about fighting Wilder next. And what immediately grabbed my attention about this is, you got legacy fighters, you got prize fighters, and then you got legacy fighters. And that's what Andy Ruiz is. He's a legacy fighter. The money's gonna be there, and of course he wants the money. Of course he wants to get paid. They all do. But the difference between a guy like Andy and a guy like Wilder is Andy wants to make history, and in many ways he already did. He's already the first Mexican heavyweight champion.
Did y'all forget?
He already pulled off a monumental upset that people are going to be talking about and reflecting on for years to come. But the buck doesn't stop there. He wants to continue to make history. He wants to become an undisputed champion. And I don't question his motives. I don't question his drive. I don't question his heart. Did we forget that he picked himself up off the canvas before he went on to beat Anthony Joshua in the first fight? So I don't doubt that Andy means business. But all those things in mind, that kind of a situation doesn't just hinge on Andy meaning business. A lot of things have to fall in line a certain way for that to even be possible. We know that Andy's entertaining the possibility of a Wilder versus Ruiz fight for the Undisputed Championship. We know that. We also know that the sanctioning bodies are in talks with each other. The WBA, the WBC, they want to see a fight like that come into fruition. But the reality of it all is that Wilder's got to make it past Ortiz, and he's got to make it past Fury before we can even entertain that conversation. And better still, Ruiz has got to show that lightning can strike twice in the rematch, because that's who he's going to be fighting next. He's going to be fighting Anthony Joshua. And he's got to beat that guy one more time before it can even become about Deontay Wilder. A lot of the news coming out of that weight class is topsy-turvy. A lot of different stuff. Wilder told the world the day before the Joshua Ruiz fight that the Fury rematch was a done deal. But we got Fury here today saying, no, it's not, because I haven't signed anything. We then have the Joshua versus Ruiz rematch coming up. And who's to say that Anthony Joshua doesn't get it together and stifle Ruiz's plans of fighting Deontay Wilder? Who's to say that Anthony Joshua don't bounce back? That the guy that we thought was going to show up in the first fight decides to show up in the second fight? Essentially, as intriguing and provocative as a Ruiz versus Wilder fight might sound, it still is a bit too premature for that conversation. I mean, I'm not even going to bother to break it down just yet, because you know what? We don't know that we're going to get there. We don't know that. A lot of things may go wrong for a lot of people before it even comes to that. That let's say Ruiz does beat Joshua in the rematch. Guess what? Wilder's still got Fury to contend with. And who's to say that Fury won't come back better and brighter and outbox him more than he did in the first fight? In which case, it might be about Fury versus Ruiz. You just don't know with the heavyweight division. You just don't know. I mean, if there's any testament to that, Andy Ruiz beat Anthony Joshua, So those things in mind. As intriguing a conversation as this is to some who are discussing it, actively discussing it, and as intriguing as that might be to them, for me, it's a bit too premature. A lot of things could happen before it comes to that. So let's let this play out before we develop overactive imaginations.